All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. This episode, we are taking a trip across the northern border yet once again in, I think this was kind of a commonplace back in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken. But this particular franchise was notorious for avoiding paying any fees that they didn't have to, and one of the things was they would always film in locations where they didn't have to work with the unions and all this other stuff. But we are talking about 1989's Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Which is kind of like, in my opinion, like the last of the, the traditional or the classic series of Friday the 13th films. Because after this, we had Jason Goes to Hell, which, that was when New Line took over and I guess Paramount sold the rights or whatever happened. So to me, Friday the 13th Part 8 kind of wraps up the series, as at least the series that we grew up with. And then everything afterwards is kind of a whole different package deal, I guess.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that it is north of the border is because this film was primarily shot in Vancouver, even though it supposedly takes place in Manhattan. And I don't remember how much of it was actually shot in Manhattan. If I remember right, they only shot like a day or 2 days in Manhattan or something. It was real quick.
Yeah, this is one of those films where, the title is Jason Takes Manhattan, and then there's so little of actual Manhattan in this. Probably just like the long shots too, right? Like the shots of when you see like the Statue of Liberty or some of that stuff, because it seems like the all those city shots that was in Vancouver, right?
I think like you said, the long shots, and then I think there's like one particular scene where it is obviously Times Square, and I think that was probably shot in Manhattan as well. But yeah, other than that, and really, I mean, this more or less should have been called Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason at Sea, more than anything.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame too, because I remember when this first came out, all the TV spots, it seemed like there were a lot of ads for this film. Do you remember that? Like every time you turned the TV on, there was like a commercial for Friday the 13th Part 8. You remember that back in the day?
Oh yeah, well that was all of them. I mean, I remember when a Nightmare on Elm Street movie was coming out, like starting with probably like Part 4 and Part 5. It was the same way. It was like there was always ads on TV for that stuff.
I just remember constantly seeing TV spots for it. And, the big thing with this film, the big marketing thing was that, Jason was going to be in a whole new environment instead of, the past 7 films. We had him in the woods and, these camps and whatnot. And this was the first time we were going to see him out in the city, which, I remember thinking was kind of a cool idea back then as a kid. I was like, oh, cool. They're putting him out he's in an urban environment now. And it reminded me kind of another thing too about that is it shows you just how much Jason was a pop culture icon at this time, where that, this is where we were headed with this franchise. I mean, they kind of totally ran out of things to do with him, places to go. So, let's put him in the city. And it was sort of like that whole, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of, like this, anything like the very pop culture, like Freddy was pop culture by this time. He was always using those classic phrases, by the time of the late 80s. So it just shows you just how popular these slashers were at the end.
Well, Friday the 13th Part 8 would have been not necessarily direct competition, but A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 would have been out relatively the same time. I mean, in the same year anyway, because that came out in 1989 as well. Yeah,
because this was Jason and Freddy. Those movies were kind of back to back at that time. There was always, it seemed like there was always something going on in that franchise. And Halloween was picking up too, because 4 and 5 came out around this time too, the late 80s. So it was sort of like that the slashers were all kind of competing for who was at the top of the list at that time.
And unfortunately, I kind of think too that Part 8 really was kind of the downfall of, well, not necessarily Part 8 itself, but I mean this time period, like the end of the 80s. And I think we've talked about this before, but that was really sort of the, you're kind of coming into the 90s, and the slasher era was kind of coming to an end a little bit, even though there was still, like you had mentioned before, there still was Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. Those both came out in the 90s. I think Jason X came out in the 90s. Yeah.
Did it? No, that came out, I think, in the 2000s.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did.
But yeah, and then, you had Halloween 6 came out in the 90s as well. Jason Takes Manhattan came out, and then all of a sudden that was kind of the end of the every year we're going to get a new slasher movie.
Yeah, you're right. That was pretty much the end of it. Like, we started to, I think Part 8, from what I read, didn't do very well in the box office, and it was really kind of sort of the end of the franchise at that point, at least probably for Paramount. But yeah, it was like that. It was so everywhere. I mean, it just seemed like Friday the 13th movies were constantly being pumped out of the studio by this point, and it just seemed like each year they were just trying to figure out a new story, a new place to go. Like, the one previous with Part 7, they had the telekinetic girl, and now this one, Jason's in Manhattan. And I know that they had been throwing around the idea of Jason versus Freddy for a while at this time too, and it just never materialized. But yeah, so this was kind of that a fresh place, a fresh location for the character, and it really does feel like a late 80s movie. It's kind of funny because when you watch the early Friday the 13th movies, they have a certain tone to them. They're a little bit more gritty and a little bit more, I don't know, there's definitely more gore, and I know we've talked about that with the MPAA and whatnot, but the earlier ones seem a bit more gritty, and then the later ones a little bit more polished and a little more, cleaner looking, and, less gore and a little bit more of that kind of made for TV vibe to it. And like this one and 7 especially, I think they seem very rushed and very quickly put together.
When did the first one come out? 81?
80.
80? Okay, so yep. Yeah, so between 1980 and 1989 you had 8 movies.
Yeah, they were just pounding these things out like on an assembly line. Although
when you look at some of the movies that come out nowadays, I mean, it's not much more than that. There was 8 Harry Potter movies. How long of a time frame was the Harry Potter movies? Was that
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
It was probably around the same time.
They must have had more time to put those movies together, though.
Oh, yeah.
These were thrown together probably. Hey, you got a weekend? Oh, free. Why? What are we doing? Oh, I got a Jason movie I got to shoot. And my buddy's cabin is free for the weekend, so you want to shoot that movie real quick, and then you can go back to doing what you were doing? Oh, yeah, sure. That's probably how these movies were just tossed together quickly. And especially part 7, for some reason. I actually really like Part 7, but when you watch it, it just seems like it's like really thrown together quickly. And this one kind of feels that way to some degree. It has that sort of feeling about it as well. And I will admit to this one where Jason definitely has lost his scariness by this point. Now he's kind of like Freddy in a sense, where he's just this cultural icon guy, and it's like the guy in the hockey mask, and he's still interesting to look at, which is kind of funny. Like every time he's on screen, your eyes are glued to the screen. Even though you've seen him a million times, it's just something about the get up. The hockey mask, the slimy outfit he's wearing and all that. He's just kind of like that monster that you just enjoy seeing on screen.
The one thing with Jason in this movie, I will say, is this movie was Kane Hodder's second time as Jason. the way that Jason is portrayed in this is, I gotta say, is probably one of the better portrayals of Jason in all of the movies. He is just, like, we were talking about body acting in the First Blood episode with Sylvester Stallone, and I tell you, Kane Hodder doesn't say a word ever as Jason Voorhees, but the way that he just breathes and walks in Part 8, to me anyway, it's just like, that's cool when you see it.
Yeah, Kane Hodder definitely had a special way of doing Jason. I know he's a favorite for a lot of fans. And yeah, he does. You definitely know it's him, how he kind of embodies that character. Yeah, like you said, with the breathing, and he's a very angry Jason. Like, he's always just kind of, he's like just ready to tear somebody up. He's just on the verge of just going crazy. Every time you see him, you just get that sense about him. Like that scene too in this where he's like walking down the street and he kicks over that boombox, and he's just this really pissed off Jason, which you don't really see. And to be honest with you, like I think I appreciate Kane Hodder's portrayal of the character. He's not my favorite Jason. I'm more of a Part 3, Part 4 guy, and I kind of like the taller, kind of hunchback, kind of, that sort of the look that they gave him in the Part 3 and 4 is like the Ted White and Richard Brooker portrayals. I thought were more for me in terms of Jason, but I do appreciate how Kane Hodder really took this character and kind of made it his own.
Yeah, I like the pissed off Jason. I never really thought of it before like that.
Oh yeah, he's always like, it's even in Part 7 too. You always kind of see that too. You can tell it's Kane Hodder. Unfortunately, like the only Kane Hodder Jasons that I enjoy are these last two, 7 and 8, because I hated Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X, I appreciated it, but it definitely not one that like I put on my list of the greatest Friday the 13th films. But yeah, I thought it. I also kind of cool. I'm a big fan of masks, and I like to collect the masks and whatnot. I thought that Friday the 13th Part 8 design was pretty cool. They changed things around a little bit. I mean, you have to be kind of a mask geek to really notice these things. But they changed the chevrons on the mask, and the little red triangles are shaped in a different direction. It's more of a yellowish color mask, and the straps are completely different. It's a whole different strap design. It's one of those things where it's Jason just so happens upon the mask that the boat he happens to climb aboard. At the beginning of the film, just happens to be, oh, there's a hockey mask aboard. All right. Obviously, for Part 7, the mask explodes and he doesn't have anything. So it's kind of cool that they fitted him with another hockey mask for this one. The slimy look was kind of cool too. Although I will say that the look that we have in Friday the 13th Part 8 does not live up to what we had in the previous film. Part 7, I thought, was a much cooler look. And it's kind of like they didn't go full on like they did. Like, Part 7, you had his ribs showing, his bones were sticking out, his like knee bone was sticking out, and bones on his hand and all of that. And this one, it's more like they focus more just on like this kind of slimy seaweed appearance of him.
That is one of the things with the Friday the 13th movies is, even though some of them you can kind of put together a timeline a little bit, you have 4, 5, and 6 where you can kind of guess how old Tommy is in each one of those movies and figure out, okay, so it's this many years between those two, and then you have... But see, then that's the thing, then like between Part 6 and Part 7, they don't really give a timeline of how long Jason was at the bottom of the lake before Tina woke him up. And then, again, they don't really ever give a timeline between the end of Part 7 and Part 8, how long Jason was hanging out at the bottom of the lake getting all slimy.
Right. Yeah, you have no idea really what it's supposed to be like, how long that's been. And it's kind of funny, nobody decided to go in the lake and pull him out of there.
Yeah, you would think that them putting that stuff in and that they would have maybe discovered him down there. I don't know.
Yeah, somebody would have found him.
Of course, I'm just curious how this lake in the middle of, because isn't Camp Crystal Lake supposed to be in New Jersey? I mean, it's stated
Something
in,
like that.
I think it's stated in one of the early movies that it is in New Jersey.
Okay.
But,
yeah, it's like on the east.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's where I shouldn't say I know that's where. I don't know if they ever filmed in New Jersey or not. I think they did some of the early stuff there, but I wonder how the lakes and the rivers and stuff in Jersey are that you can go from Camp Crystal Lake all the way out to the Manhattan. I mean, that's a heck of a trip.
Yeah, I know there must be some. And you're going to take like a big cruise ship. When I think of Camp Crystal Lake, I think of like this, little lake, somewhere in some small little town, and where the for kids and campgrounds and things like that. I don't think of anything that's connected to the ocean. But yeah, it's kind of weird. But yeah, that's a strange plot point when you think about that. Hey, let's get them on a boat, and the boat's somehow going to connect to the ocean somehow. But I mean, what rivers would do that? Like, I mean, there must be some, like, I don't know my geography enough.
Yeah, I know it is just always a weird thing with it. I mean, it's one of those. It's a horror movie, and it's a it's a little bit of a campy horror movie, so you can't put too much stock into it. But it's one of those things like if you ever like really think about it, you're like, how does that even work? I mean, I know you could get in a boat and in say like Dubuque, Iowa, and in theory you could make it all the way to the Gulf of Mexico via the Mississippi River, but I don't know if you can actually go that far. I don't know if you can actually get all the way there or not. I have no idea. You would think there'd be some dams or some low spots along the way.
Yeah. You just never think of like jumping on a cruise ship on Camp Crystal Lake. It just doesn't seem like something you would see. But oh well. You have to suspend your disbelief for these films.
Well, even the houseboat at the beginning of the movie, like even that, you wouldn't even really think to see on with the size of the lake. I always envision it as a lake that you can stand on a shore and you can see everything, all the way around the lake.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it too in my head, like even possibly being a man-made lake, but I guess like they had a different view of it. At least for part 8 they did. I wonder if you could go back and watch like part 1 or part 2 and like towards like some of those scenes where they're on the lake and they're swimming and all that. See if you could see like
a cruise ship in the background.
Yeah, cruise ship in the background or the other side of the lake, one of the two.
But that's like we live on this river here. There's a river that runs through the town that we live in, and there's a couple of sections of the river that you go out and like because we go kayaking and stuff all the time, and you'll see these people will have like these big old pontoon boats and stuff strapped up by their houses. And, I'm just like, so I know that you're in between like 2 dams. So do you just like take that pontoon boat out for like a little couple of mile jaunt every time when you go out,
Did you see any cruise ships going through that river?
No, not at all.
No Disney cruise or anything?
But I like those people that own the pontoon boats. I mean, that's every time I see those, I'm like, so what do you just go like 15 minutes that way and then turn around and come like 15 minutes back this way and then turn around and go home?
Right.
Or there was one day we were out there kayaking and there was a family that was sitting on the boat, but it was like tied up to their dock. And then we had like kayaked past and then, cause we don't go that horribly far, we spend maybe an hour, maybe 2 at the most out there, just kind of tool around for a couple miles but we went a ways and then came back and it was probably a good half an hour later and we were coming back and they were still sitting on the boat, still tied to the dock. And I'm like, maybe that's all they do. Maybe they just come out there and hang out.
Just hang out on the dock. Grab a couple of beers.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
If you're looking towards the lake and not towards the house, it seems like you're out on the on a boat trip.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to look and see. I'll have to watch. Maybe trying to think of a good one where they're actually... Well, part 1, they're by the water quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, part 1 and part 2. There's some good scenes like during the day, too, where they're out at the lake.
Yeah.
hanging out,
Part
swimming.
3 there. Well, part 3. Well, part 3 is not at the camp though.
Yeah, it's a different location.
So.
Or 6. Part 6 as well. The end of 6 when you see him, Tommy Jarvis versus
Well, in part
Jason.
7 actually, there's quite a bit too because
Yeah, there you
all
go.
the Tina stuff on the dock and.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're absolutely. Yeah, you'll have to take a look there, see if you see any Disney cruise ships in the background.
Yeah, or you're going to get some fan that's going to write in and be like, hey, dumbasses, this is how you can get to the ocean from Crystal Lake.
Another thing I wanted to bring up about Friday the 13th Part 8 was we probably have our least interesting and our least memorable final girl. Like for whatever reason, like, every time she just, I don't know, you think about like, Amy Steele, Trish from Part 4, Melanie Kinnaman, Part 5. It's like, and then obviously like Tina Part 7. I mean, they all have these like kind of memorable characteristics to them. And whereas, I don't know, Part 8's, final girl just doesn't really cut it.
The thing with this movie that always kind of reminded me, or I always thought of in this particular movie is, and I know that a lot of the characters in slasher movies and horror movies in general, I mean, they kind of jokingly talk about this in Scream and stuff, but there are certain stereotypes, of course. But the final girl in this movie, she always kind of reminded me of what's her face from the what was it, Friday the 13th Part 4, or not Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. In Part 5, didn't the Alice?
Really? No, I don't see that at all.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's just me then.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
I do enjoy Part 8 now. When I was younger, I didn't.
Really? You didn't care for it?
No, not when I was, I didn't for a long time, but now I do. I gotta say that this movie, again, and I think it's sort of, kind of a response to A Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit, because even though by this point we already had kind of the zombie Jason, as people like to refer to him as, or undead Jason, when you get towards the end of this movie, then it even gets kind of like weird and supernatural, which is,
it does.
You have the whole thing with Jason turning back into a child, and it's just, and that scene still to me is kind of dumb. There are different parts in this movie that are, again, it is a horror movie and you have to take it for what it is, but there's another scene in this movie that always reminds me of RoboCop, and it's the scene where he like dunks the guy into the barrel of toxic waste that's in the street, and I was like, what world do these people live in that there's just toxic waste just out in the street?
That's such an 80s trope. It seemed like the 80s had a big thing for toxic waste, and for, like in the city, when you picture a 80s urban movie, you always think of like a vat of toxic waste just bubbling over
just
somewhere.
So weird.
In an alley. Yeah, going back to the Jason thing with the kid Jason, that was kind of weird too, because they portray him with the hair and like kind of almost like a. Does he have the kind of the deformed eye, like when he has the hair, or is that?
No, that's kind of because they kind of they have him like there's one scene where he looks like a fairly normal kid in this movie. Yeah, and then he's kind of mongoloid in a different part. It's really kind of odd.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't like about in movies when they do that, when they because we know what Jason looks like, because we saw in the first movie you see him at the end, obviously, when he jumps up and grabs Alice, but even before that, when they show the shot of him drowning, like that, and when you go back to the flashback, that you could clearly see what he looked like, enough to know that he was, first of all, he was bald, and second of all, I do think he had the eye issue, so that wasn't something that happened after he died. We were out to believe that he had that that appearance while he was alive, And so like they do this whole thing where he's like this, he doesn't have any deformity or anything like that, and it's just like just kind of weird. It just sort of takes you out of the movie a little bit. I didn't really care for that at all.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that with all of these, especially when you go back to like the 80s and stuff. Again, the second time bringing Scream up this episode, but that was one of the things with the Scream movies was the killer in the Scream movies. He didn't look different every movie. I mean, you could, yep, there he is. He looks pretty much exactly the same as he did in the last one.
Yeah.
To where even, like you had mentioned, I mean, I know this one he gets a new mask. At least the Friday the 13th movies aren't as bad as the Halloween movies are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like,
with the masks, yeah.
Yeah, like, that is a completely different mask.
Right.
It's not the same at all.
Like the mask from part 4 to part 5 is ridiculous, and then to part 6. But, yeah, I mean, the Halloween movies are a disaster as a franchise. I mean, they're bouncing around everywhere. But
I mean, Friday the 13th does, in the later movies, and Jason X especially, where there's that opening scene where they have Jason in confinement, and you can clearly tell that is Kane Hodder under the mask, where you can see like his eye and stuff. And you're like, did you guys just run out of money? What's going on? But yeah, that's one thing that always bugs me in not just necessarily horror movies. I mean, horror movies are the worst ones for it because, anymore you have a lot of these other, like, especially like action movies that seem to be getting a lot of sequels anymore. Fast and Furious comes to mind, where there's like 9 of those movies now or something.
Oh yeah, they keep going and going.
Yeah, with the horror movies, I mean, how hard is it to? I know the argument always is, well, it's a new person doing this or it's a new person doing that, and they have their own vision. Well, evidently, they can't pick up a freaking picture and look how he looked and how he's supposed to look.
They did an okay job with like kind of the Friday movies, like we said, like they do a better job with the continuity with the character than like obviously like the Michael Myers movies. I mean, the Halloween masks look ridiculous from movie to movie, but like this one, like it's enough of the same character that we saw in Part 7. I mean, obviously they didn't go full on with some of the decaying effects and whatnot, but it's that they kept the hockey mask pretty close throughout all of them. Even though this was supposed to be a different one, it was still like the same type of mask. It wasn't like a complete deviation, which was nice.
They should have went with like the new style, goalie mask. That would have been great.
Right. So, like, with this one, what do you think about the death scenes? I thought they were pretty lackluster, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nothing really stuck out as like, oh, wow. Like, there's no, like, scene like the hedge clippers in Part 5 or, like the corkscrew in Part 4. There's nothing that really stuck out in this one.
Yeah, I think the most famous scene in this one is the boxing scene on top of the building where he punches the dude's head off and it lands in the garbage can or the dumpster.
Yeah. Right, and again, that's more of like a cartoony type of death than doesn't have that sort of the horror elements that we've seen in like the previous ones. And again, that goes back to, I think that's something that we could say started with Part 6, because Part 5 is its own little beast. So I'm going to leave that one out for a minute. But like from Part 1 through 4 are straight up horror movies. Like all the deaths are meant to scare you or shock you. We're starting at Part 6. It's like they turned it into more of like that. There's a little bit more comedy involved here. Like I think of Part 6 with the paintball shooters and things like that. Where like Jason beheads 3 people in a row, and then he throws the one guy against the tree, and there's a smiley face engraved in the tree. And it's like this one, Part 8. It's like they're kind of going with a little bit more of the comedic approach. Because he's like, I guess Zombie Jason's a little bit more cartoony in that way. So like, we've got the guitar across the face, which was kind of funny. I don't know if you watched that. I saw this in one of those behind the scenes things where they throw the blood up before he actually hits her with the guitar. Yeah, if you watch it, it's a shot of her screaming, and then you see Jason and he swings the guitar, and then blood shoots up on the screen. Well, blood shoots up on the screen before he's done swinging the guitar. It's pretty funny.
Oh, I have to, next time I watch this, I have to pay attention for that. Yeah, this
Oh,
is
and,
definitely one of those ones I don't watch very often, that's for sure.
and another little Easter egg I wanted to toss in there, which I thought was kind of cool, is Ken Kersinger. He's the guy who played Jason in Freddy versus Jason. So he's like the tallest of all the Jasons, or the tallest guy that ever played him. He is actually in this film. Do you know who he is in this film?
Mm-mm.
He is he is the cook in the diner, the New York cook, where basically when Jason goes into the diner and that big giant guy comes out to confront him, and Jason picks him up and throws him up against the wall.
Huh.
That's the guy. That's the guy who played Jason in Freddy vs. Jason.
Hmm.
We saw him. We didn't meet him formally, but he was at Flashback. Yeah, it's kind of funny because looking back now, because I know Kane Hodder was pretty upset that he didn't get the role of Jason for Freddy vs. Jason, because he was kind of anticipating that he would get that when they finally did that movie, and so they gave it to that guy. So I don't know. He probably wants to do a lot more than just throw him against a wall at this point.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that I give Jason Takes Manhattan a pretty big thumbs up. This is definitely, this falls into the whole beer and popcorn movie category for sure. This is, while I would say this is my least favorite of the Paramount Friday the 13th movies, it's still better than pretty much everything that came after the Paramount days for sure. But yeah, this is definitely an enjoyable entry into the franchise.
The big reveal in this one when the mask comes off, that's one of the things with all the Friday the 13th movies. You always, at the end you get the reveal where you get to see what he looks like. And this one, he had that like Muppet look. Actually, I think he was a Muppet at that shot, at least that shot where he gets the toxic waste doused in his face. And I remember the first time I saw that was in a issue of Fangoria magazine. They revealed what his face looked like. I think it was on the cover, if I remember correctly.
Oh, really? That's kind of a bummer.
Or maybe it was inside. I know it was revealed, and I remember thinking, that's a weird looking design for Jason. But anyhow, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same with you. I'm going to give it a thumbs up with this one. It is definitely, any Paramount Friday the 13th movie is by all means a beer and popcorn film. And of course, there's some better than others, and this one's definitely on the lower end of the Paramount films for me. It may actually be the one that it probably is my least favorite of the Paramount films, but at the same time, it's still a Friday the 13th movie, and it's enjoyable for just seeing Jason on the screen and hearing that soundtrack. So yeah, thumbs up. Get yourself a nice PBR and some popcorn.